Detective, I now want to return to the interview and specific conversations about what Ms. Schabusiness told you on February 23rd of 2022. First of all, can you start by describing, what her general demeanor was when you met with her on the 23rd?
Well, characteristic as a calm demeanor, no outbursts, no mood swings. She was quite frank in being able to answer questions and ask questions.
What was your ability to communicate with her?
Very good. She was able to answer my questions and with no issues.
You indicated that you had previous work as a narcotics investigator. Have you had an opportunity in the past to meet with and interview suspects who are under the influence of drugs?
Yes.
Did you note anything in Ms. Schabusiness's behavior, demeanor, or appearance that would have suggested that she was under the influence of narcotics at the time you were meeting with her on the 23rd?
I did not.
Can you describe, going into that interview, how much information you had about the specific acts themselves?
At a particular time, I had very little information. What I knew was that she has their head had been found in a bucket in the basement, and also just the information that I had from talking to his mother about who was he last seen with and his last known whereabouts, according to her.
In terms of the specifics of what happened to Shad and where the rest of his body was, is that information that you knew prior to beginning the interview with Ms. Schabusiness?
No.
The information about Shad and what happened to him and where his body was, where did that information come from?
Ms. Schabusiness.
And to begin your interview, how did you begin asking her about the specific events?
I basically stated to her that with the information that I had, and the information that I had at that point in time was that Shad's head had been found in a bucket in the basement, and that she at one point had been with Shad. So I just asked her if she could tell me what happened.
And was she able to describe to you what happened?
Yes.
What did she say with respect to how Shad was killed?
How Shad was killed?
Correct.
She said that Shad had produced a chain, like a dog collar, and put it around his neck. Initially, it sounded like it might have been some sort of foreplay, but it got to the point that she started to strangle Mr. Therian and just continued to do so, according to her, for several minutes until he passed away.
Did she, as it relates to the strangulation, did she make any statements about her observations of Shad as she was choking him with that chain?
Yes, she stated that his head turned purple. He started to, I believe, blood coming out of his mouth. His tongue was protruded, I believe.
Did you ask her whether she chose to stop at that juncture?
I did.
And what was her response?
She stated that she wanted to continue to see what happened.
And did you ask her whether or not Shad had struggled at all when she was choking him?
She said that he did.
And what was her response to that?
My understanding is that Shad had been laying on the bed, prone, face down, and she was on top of him. And so she was able to choke and control his body, so to speak, that even though he was struggling, she was able to still maintain control.
Did you ask her about how she felt about what she had done?
Yes.
And what were her responses?
Objection, relevance, yes to elements, Your Honor.
I think they're certainly relevant as to her intent.
Overruled.
Her response was that she liked it.
Had she also at some point expressed some remorse or that she didn't necessarily want this to happen?
Initially, that was some of her comments, was that, it had intended, but once she started to strangle Shad, that she found that she did enjoy it, and so she kept on strangling him.
Had she expressed anything to you about her use of drugs at the time of the offense or immediately prior to the time of the offense?
She said that approximately 2 days prior to the offense that she and Shad had been smoking methamphetamine.
2 days prior to the offense or 2 days prior to the interview?
I'm sorry, 2 days prior to the interview.
Did she mention anything to you specifically about drugs or paraphernalia that might be found in the residence?
Yeah, she stated that there should be a pipe and some methamphetamine in the basement on a dresser or an entertainment center of some sort.
Did she express any knowledge about the location of the chain or chains that were used to strangle Shad?
Yeah, she stated that there was 2 chains. One would be the same location area as where the methamphetamine was used, and another would be in another table in the basement.
And now, I think I asked this earlier, but you're in communication with the investigators who are on scene during the course of this interview, is that correct?
Correct.
And the information that Ms. Schabusiness is providing you about where things are located and what they might see in the basement, is that being confirmed by investigators on scene?
It is.
And the information that she's providing you, is that accurate with what they're observing?
Yes.
After the strangulation itself, what did Ms. Schabusiness tell you that she did with Shad?
Well, initially, we were aware of Shad's head being in a bucket, but we were not aware of where the rest of his body had been located. So there were several questions pertaining to where his body was located. And Ms. Schabusiness' response to that it was still in the basement. Then she went on to explain that she in fact had dismembered Shad's body and placed the various body parts into several bags and or a tote down in the basement.
Was she able to describe in detail the things that she did to dismember Shad?
Yes.
And again, are you matching that back up with information from investigators at the scene?
Correct.
Was she able to actually describe the types of bags or types of containers where she's placing body parts?
Yes.
And again, is that consistent with what investigators are later finding on the scene?
Yes.
Did she talk to you about how she dismembered or what she used to dismember Shad's body?
Yes, she stated that she used knives that she obtained from the kitchen of the residence.
Was she able to describe to you where those knives would be located in the basement?
Yes, she described that the knives would be in the same package or the bags that the body parts were also located.
And again, is that consistent with what investigators were finding on scene?
Yes.
In addition to the dismemberment, did Ms. Schabusiness discuss with you anything else that she did with Shad's body after she had killed him?
Yes, she did.
And what was that?
She described how she had sexual contact with the body in terms of playing with his penis. Also, she described that she had a dildo that she placed into Shad's mouth and to his anus, and that she also had cuddled the body.
Did she discuss performing oral sex on Shad?
That's correct.
Did she indicate about how long she had cuddled or played with Shad's body?
She indicated that, it was, I don't exactly recall how long of a period of time, but there was a period of time, I believe shortly before or after the start of dismemberment.
Did she talk to you at all about trying to clean up the scene or what she was doing with the blood during the course of the dismemberment?
Yes, I had been made aware that there was not a significant portion of blood found in the basement that would have been consistent with dismemberment. So I asked her about that, and my response was that she mainly used like the bucket and or the blue tote to capture a lot of the blood, and eventually did dispose of some of that into the shower in the basement. She also did talk about the dismemberment and the removal of body parts, and in fact that there should still be a portion of Shad's lower limbs, like legs, in the van that she had been operating. So she did describe how she did remove at least a couple of his body parts during the course of dismemberment. And when I say move, I mean out of the residence itself.
And did she specifically give you a reason for why she ultimately left the residence on that day?
She told me that she had heard lots of walking around upstairs, and she also heard that she had thought she had heard some shots being fired in the area. In this call, there's some concern, and she just decided that she had needed to leave at that point.
Did she discuss with you what her intention was with respect to Shad's head?
One of the first things that she did say was that she did like the head, and that it was her intent to take the head as well as the genitalia that was in a bucket with her. That's why she specifically placed those items in the bucket. But she did mention that she had left the bucket by the stairs. And I don't know if she intentionally wanted to do that, but there was talk that it was her intent to take the head and the genitalia with her also.
At some point in time, do you discuss with Ms. Schabusiness a specific timeline for the events leading up to that evening?
Yes.
And what does she tell you about the timeline of her whereabouts leading up to this event?
2 days before the 21st, that Monday, is when she was at the apartment on Eastman Avenue with her friend AJ. They decided to go pick up Shad, which they did do. They were returned back to the apartment. At one point, they also did visit Shad's father, Michael Therian, and then also again returned to the apartment at Eastman Avenue, where they stayed there for a while. At one point, AJ left, and then Shad and Taylor then returned to Shad's mother's residence on Stony Brook Lane.
And the information that she's providing you with respect to the timeline, is that information that also was consistent with the other aspects of your investigation?
Correct.
Had she mentioned to you while you're discussing the timeline use of narcotics or controlled substances?
While they were in the apartment on Eastman Avenue, they did use, her and Shad smoked methamphetamine, and she also indicated that Shad and AJ smoked marijuana.
Had she talked to you about what vehicles she was using to travel around to these locations?
Yes, the entire time she was using her roommate, Mr. Dom's gold Chrysler minivan.
Did you ask her whether Mr. Toms had given her permission to use the vehicle?
I don't know if I asked her specifically that question, no. But it was under impression that she was using it. At the time of the interview, I was not sure. I later found out that Mr. Toms claimed that she has used it in the past, but not necessarily was supposed to use it that night.
Did she tell you any information about whether Mr. Toms was involved in this crime at all?
He was just at the apartment the entire time, sitting in a chair basically, and according to her, he wasn't even aware of what they were doing because he was either behind him or in the bedroom.
When you were speaking with Ms. Schabusiness, did you ask her about whether or not anyone else had come down into the basement at any point in time?
Yes.
And what did she say?
That's when she stated that she believed that Shad's mother had come down with a cat.
And did she discuss actually having any interaction with Chad's mother at that time?
She said that she did not, and I asked Taylor if she thought that the mother had seen her, and she stated that she did not believe so. Asked her what she did, and Taylor just stated basically that she kept quiet and was off in the like the finished part of the basement.
So I want to draw your attention then to the second interview with Ms. Schabusiness. That occurred on February 28th, is that right?
Correct.
And that was also a recorded interview?
Yes, it was.
And you advised her of her Miranda rights prior to that interview?
I did.
And she waived those rights and agreed to answer questions?
Yes, she did.
Did you make observations of her demeanor generally on that day?
I would classify it as being the same, calm, was able to answer questions appropriately, no outward signs of any disruptions or mood swings.
And was she able to understand your questions and answer them appropriately?
Objection
Yes.
calls for speculation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Leading? Argument for leading?
Pardon?
Argument for leading, alternative argument, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead, ask another question, Mr. Levy.
Thank you. And what was generally the purpose of conducting that second interview with Ms. Schabusiness?
Conduct some follow-up questions concerning that we had that came up during the course of the investigation concerning like her disposition of the body, what were her intentions of what they're doing with the body, and her cleaning up after herself.
And what did she say with respect to the purpose of dismemberment and then the cleanup?
According to Ms. Business, the purpose was that she realized she needed to remove the body from the residence so that she wouldn't be caught, and Shad was more that she could carry just in terms of being a whole body. So the dismemberment and putting them into bags was to facilitate with her being able to remove the body from the residence.
And did you discuss with her the attempts to clean up the residence as well?
Yes, and Detective Scanlon had been an integral part of the search of the residence itself, so he asked her several questions about cleaning up because he had observed some markings or on the cement down area that had been underneath the bed, as well as there was a squeegee in the shower down in the basement, in some items such as Clorox, wipes, and so he asked her about that, and she stated that yes, she did use the cleaning materials such as the Clorox wipes and the spray to clean up several of the areas in the basement, as well as using squeegee to clean up the shower area, and subsequently placed these wipes in the same bags that the body parts was found, which again is consistent with what Detective Scanlon had found.
And Detective, I think I asked you these questions already, but have you had an opportunity subsequent to the interviews to review the recorded interview from both the 23rd and the 28th of February?
Correct.
And you do believe that the recordings were accurate and consistent with your recollection of the interviews?
They are.
Your Honor, at this point, I intend to show significant portions of the first interview and a smaller portion of the second interview, but it's about an hour and 10 minutes in length for the first interview and about 4 minutes for the second. So I think now would be a good time to take a break.